recording. Oh, and I was just about to say good Shabbos, everyone, but of course, then I'd have to tell the story about Shabbos on Wednesday, a Levi Yitzchak and Berditchev story. Um, but this evening is going to be filled with stories, and all of them from our favorite book, Jewish with Feeling. And let me remind you that next week, the same Reb Zalman station, same Reb Zalman of blessed memory time, Reb Eve Ilson will be joining us. That Eve is Reb Zalman's widow, whose name was mentioned, a rabbinic pastor in her own right, and just amazing teacher as well. And hopefully she'll help us understand what made Reb Zalman tick. Welcome, Judy Young. Who else have I welcomed? I think I welcomed everybody. And you know me, I'll welcome everybody. So that's a funny story, actually. It's not a Reb Zalman story, but in that I almost said Good Shabbos, in that most of you, if not all of you, know that I'm also a musician and that I've had a band for 30 years now. We don't play too much anymore, but we're playing a wedding next Friday morning with 25 people, all physically distanced from each other. But anyway, throughout the years, I have played with many, many different musicians, many of whom are not Jewish. Washington, D.C. is blessed to be an area in which there is a plethora, and I have not used that word today, so I had to get it in, a plethora of professional musicians who are all in the armed forces band. So in the Army, the Navy band, the Army bands, every one of the armed forces has a band. And these guys are like the unbelievable musicians. And having played in Jewish bands forever, these guys know the Jewish music almost as well as I do. So my friend Lee Lockman, who is a reed player, he tells a story about coming out of church one Sunday, and the pastor is there. And Lee is so used to playing, B'nai and mitzvah parties on Shabbos or playing with me at weddings. He goes to the minister and he almost says, "Good Shabbos," but he has to pull the words back before he says them. So I almost said Good Shabbos. It's always almost Shabbos, and we're always counting up to Shabbos. So I mentioned today that this may be the penultimate Reb Zalman book get together. Is that the word? The one before the last one? Thank you, Scott Ryder. With Eve joining us next week, it'll be a Machaya, and I'm not sure what we'll be able to, unless we just want to get together and review it. But anyway, we're going to actually skip a chapter. But tonight we're going to pick up where Joel left off last week. And as always, please don't hesitate, which I know you won't, to jump in with any comments or observations. All righty. So for those of you who were with me on Shabbos morning, Renee told a story. It's a very famous story about feathers. And if you were paying attention, the story is on page 127, and that's where we're going to pick up today. And we're going to spend a lot of time reading stories that Reb Zalman tells in here. And I remind you how Reb Zalman inscribed the book that I'm holding, which he gave to me as a gift, MOSh ben Avraham, who tells stories to open us to the reality of virtue, which Reb Zalman mentioned earlier in the book about Reb Shlomo. Okay. And of course, Reb Zalman always said a good maisa, a good story, is where the heart surprises the mind, right? Where the heart gets moved first and the mind goes, oh, I got that. It's like an aha that arises from Yitzira, that arises from the place of being touched, here in the heart or in the kishkis first, where you get it in a real deep place. And then the mind kind of catches up. All righty. So would someone like to read the story on the page 127, where it's in the shaded part doorway? It's a mitzvah. And it's in the third paragraph. It starts, "A man came to the Chavetz Chaim." Okay, Mary Rita, please.
A man came to the Hofetz Chaim once and told him that he wanted to do teshuvah, to repent from saying bad things about people, and that he needed help. I'll show you how to do this, the Hofetz Chaim said, if you bring me a pillow. When the man brought him a pillow, the Hofetz Chaim cut the pillow open, then leaned out the window and let the feathers fly where they would. When you brought all the feathers back and returned them to the pillow, the Hofetz Chaim told him, you will have done teshuvah for your deeds. Watching the feathers swirl away far beyond his control, the man broke down in tears, realizing the immensity of what he had done. Committing acts of kindness and refraining from acts of unkindness are mitzvot.
Thank you, Mary Rita. So a couple of comments here. First of all, Renee told a very different version of the story that we actually helped her mold the night before. Andrea, you don't know, Renee is my wife, and she's a storyteller. And this telling is a little problematic to me. Why is it problematic? Anybody?
Because
okay, go ahead. Oh, David, welcome.
David, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because the man at the beginning of the story said he wished to do tshuva because he was already feeling badly somehow about what he had done, and the source of that is not made clear.
And he did not have it. I mean, he was shown the immensity of what he did, but I don't think he was given a chance to do teshuvah. He was just, led to have more like a willingness to do teshuvah that grew. But there were so many feathers. There wasn't an ending to this story.
Yeah, so it's kind of a curious telling of the story because the man wants to do teshuvah, and the Chafetz Chaim is basically illustrating that he can't, because he can't take all of these things back. So, my friends, don't tell this version. Or if you are, Judy, leave out the part that, once you've collected them, you will have done teshuvah for your deeds. So luckily, Reb Zalman's looking over my shoulder here, but I don't hear him contacting, I hear him saying, Moshe, you're right. If I had the chance to change the book, I would. You were going to say, Judy.
I was going to say, when I first learned this story, it was told in the context of how you can't take back Lashon Hara. That, if you spread rumors and lies or whatever about people, it's like scattering to feather. And I think the version that I first heard was, the rabbi told whoever was the perpetrator of the Lashon Hara to go up to the tower, and stand up on the tower and open the feathers from the pillow and watch what happens. And then the moral of the story is, that's how I learned the story.
Right. And that's the more common version. Right. I've never read it the way that Reb Zalman tells it here. Right. He ends it with committing acts of kindness and refraining from acts of unkindness are mitzvot. So that points out to us there are two different kinds of mitzvot, and we're on the chapter about mitzvot. And last week we mentioned that a mitzvah, the word itself, is connected grammatically to the Aramaic tzavta, which means to connect, right? So there are ways to connect by doing, and there are ways to connect by refraining. So if there's a ta'aseh, right? It's a mitzvah ta'aseh. It's one that you should oset, you should do, right? Mitzvah lo ta'aseh, it's a mitzvah that it's something that you should not do. So let's get a couple of examples of each. What is an example of a mitzvah lo ta'aseh, something you shouldn't do? That's one of the 613, which, by the way, there's a lot of disagreement about counting those 613. And we know many of them are impossible to do anyway because the Mikdash doesn't stand anymore. But regardless, so what are some negative things that we learn? Deborah? I say it again.
Thou shalt not steal.
You should not steal. That's right. Don't take, which also leads to, it's all wrapped up with jealousy as well, feeling and a lack of having enoughness. Yeah, Haf.
Thou shalt not put your knee on the neck of another person to kill them.
I think that someone has learned that lesson very well. Perhaps. We wish. Thank you, Haf. I think thou shalt not kill is covered by that. But thank you. We're all relieved. Although I have to admit to thinking about the Midrash about the angels, at the sea, and God with all the celebration around, and yes, it had to happen. But there was a part of me that felt gewalt. If we could actually change the world in which we live in, we wouldn't have to celebrate over moments like that, and be castigated by divinity because of something like that happening. Anyway, a hand, Chaya, please.
I'm reminded of Miriam criticizing her brother, Moshe. So being critical of others, especially being exceptionally judgmental.
So there are two things that you are touching upon that are in this week's double parsha Acharei Mot, Kedoshim. Kedoshim is sometimes referred to as the holiness code. And two mitzvot that are in there one has to do with rechilut, which is a kind of gossip. We talked about that last week a little bit. And yes, the whole section about Miriam, talking about Moshe having married, out of the tribe, does not go well for her. Although it is interesting that Aharon is there and does the same and is not punished in the same way that she is. And but we'd have to go down that rabbi hole in order to unpack that. Okay, so that's one thing, and the other thing is offering tochacha is in this week's parsha as well. So what is tochacha? It's rebuke, and we have a whole wonderful tradition of that is necessary to rebuke our neighbor, but only in a way that that person can hear it in a loving way, right? And that's all tied into Ve'ahavta reacha kamocha. So one should rebuke another person in the way that you would want to be rebuked, at a time and a place that you are open to hearing it, in a way that's loving, in a way that you could possibly use the rebuke to change the action, okay? So all of this is going on in the story because you are raising up these issues, which what happens when you tell a good Maisa? All of these things come out. Alrighty. Any questions, comments before we move on? Page 131. And this is going to take a while because we're going to read through this whole story. Where does he start? Oh, yeah. So I heard Reb Zalman tell this story in the flesh about Brother Rufus and going on top of the roof. I think he said it was a Holiday Inn. He doesn't give Holiday Inn, any credit here in this telling of it. But it's a beautiful, beautiful story about seeing the sacred in different traditions. And this is so quintessential Reb Zalman, right? So quintessential, and explains so much about how we understand his deep ecumenism and his relationship to others. And then also we're going to get other traditions, spiritual traditions, and then this will cap off with the story about the Dalai Lama, all right? So this whole section about mitzvot, he's venturing into stories about being with people from other traditions and how to learn from them. So who would like to read for a little while? We're at page 131 at the bottom. The third line, it says, I once went to an interfaith gathering of mystics and philosophers in Calgary. Don't you wish you can go to a gathering like that? Deborah, you want to read? Okay, you be our philosopher. And
since it's Calgary and Canadian.
Of course. Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
I once went to an interfaith gathering of mystics and philosophers in Calgary. We stayed in a generic modern hotel, downtown hotel, and were scheduled to begin the meetings at breakfast. I got up before dawn to daven, but the hotel room didn't feel like the right ambience, so I went upstairs and found a trapdoor that led out to the roof.
I never pictured a trapdoor when he told the story. I'm picturing you walk out the roof, to a door. But go ahead. This is Reb Zalman. Maybe he is making it a little more juicy.
He's a
Go ahead.
storyteller.
Yes, that's right.
I stepped out, surrounded by chimneys and vents, found a corner, took out my talis and tefillin and siddur, and prepared myself for prayer. 5 minutes later, the trapdoor opened again, and up came Brother Rufus Goodstriker, a blood Indian. We nodded to each other. Brother Rufus found his own corner, unpacked his prayer blanket, lit a little fire, and offered up some herbs.
Can you imagine on the roof of the Holiday Inn, he's lighting a little fire. There's something missing, but I'm going to fill it in with my imagination. I hope you do too. Go ahead.
So we said our prayers, he in his corner, me in mine. The sun was rising over the prairie to the east. The alpenglow was lighting up the Rocky Mountains to the west. Just as the sun came over the horizon, Brother Rufus blew an eagle bone whistle in all 4 directions to greet it. Suddenly, since it was shortly before the high holidays, I took out my ram's horn and gave a blow too, as is the Jewish custom.
So now Reb Zalman's going to continue with information in the form of a dialogue, which he never told in person. When he told the story the only way I ever heard the story was they did what they did. They inspected each other's ritual objects. They nodded to each other in understanding, and then they separated and went their ways. So whether or not the story that I heard is what happened, or this story, it doesn't much matter, except for the fact that there's more information here that I'm going to, maybe Eve knows. Somebody bookmark this moment, and we'll ask Eve next week if she knows. And I can predict she said, he used to tell it both ways. Matter of fact, there's a third way. All right, somebody want to pick up here. After we had finished, Brother Rufus came over to me. Go ahead, Meira. Thank you, Deborah. Meira, you have to unmute yourself. Biduk.
After we had finished, Brother Rufus came over to me. "May I see your instruments?" he asked. "I wasn't home," he added, "so I couldn't take a sweat, but I took a shower this morning instead. If I'm going to touch someone else's spiritual instruments," he was saying, "I should be ritually clean."
Important part of the story, right? Important part of the story where traditions overlap. Here's our Venn diagram, being ritually pure. Continue.
He picked up my tefillin first. "Rawhide," he noted. He noticed they were sewn together with natural gut and knotted. He looked carefully at the knots and ran his fingers over them slowly. "Noble knots," he said. Next, he shook the tefillin's headpiece and heard something move. "What's inside the black box?" "A piece of parchment," I told him, on which was written holy texts with God's name. He nodded. He picked up the shofar and looked it over. "Ram's horn," he said, blew a few loud notes and handed it back. "Much better than cow." Then he examined the knotted fringes at the corner of my talit, each with 5 double knots interspersed with columns of wound thread. "What's the message?" he asked.
Okay, so let's stop there. I do find it interesting and understandable that Brother Rufus could blow the shofar and get a sound out of it, right? We all know how hard it is to get a sound out of a shofar, the first, second, third, even if we are very experienced shofar, a Baal Kriya, not a Baal Kriya, a Baal shofar. sometimes on high holidays, our lips can get very dry and it's hard to get a sound out of it. So I'm very impressed if this is really what happened, that that Brother Rufus could get some sounds out of that ram's horn. Alrighty, so then he goes on and tell this story from the Talmud about the man who sees a prostitute and is reminded by the fringes, right, of who he is. And so let's keep in mind that the wearing of fringes, again, the wearing of tzitzit is a mitzvah, right? We know from the third paragraph of the Shema, right? We know where to wear them, and it's rabbinic tradition doesn't say anywhere in Tanakh that we're supposed to kiss them. You know, there's a similar story about King David about to, and I forget specifically what he was about to do, but some kind of an avera. I wish King David had kept this more in mind, because he was almost like the king, pun intended, of averas, right? He did live a quite questionable life for us to hold him in such high accord. I guess we really honor poets. But he's about to do an avera and of this similar kind. And he looks down and sees his circumcised penis. And he remembers who he is. All right. So remember that circumcision is a sign of the covenant. It's not the covenant. It's not the Brit. It's an oath. It's oti leolam, right? Just like Shabbat. It's an oath. And so looking at a circumcised penis, looking at, of course, our tzitzit, there are so many doorposts, pun intended, in our day for us to be reminded of who we are and how to behave as Yidden in this world, right? As Menschlich. We're going to be touching upon that a little bit this Shabbos morning, about the rituals that we sustain that lead us into presence, that remind us of who we are and what our responsibility to each other are through mitzvot. Give me just a second. So a question before. Oh, actually, let's look at page 136. Here is the section about the Dalai Lama I mentioned before. And you can read the story in The Jew in the Lotus. So the Dalai Lama asks Reb Zalman, what? How have we lived in exile for 4,000 years? Actually, 2,000 years. Because the Dalai Lama has the same source, right? And Reb Zalman tells him to create a Seder, to create a memory ritual. Everybody loves to eat. That's why Seder is just so brilliant, isn't it? To tell our story and as if, and to remember as if we were slaves in Egypt, right? Ki'ilu. So it's a brilliant suggestion Reb Zalman makes. I don't know if the Dalai Lama ever taken him up on this. But he says, before the Chinese robbed you of your homeland, it was easier to pass on your culture and beliefs to your children's children's children. Now that you're in the diaspora, you need to create and maintain a portable homeland, a shared cognitive space that every Tibetan family can relate to and participate in, the things that are ledorotam, that you can do on behalf of future generations. So why not use the Seder as a model? By the way, this idea of taking things on the road, a portable, what does he say? A portable, create and maintain a portable homeland. Reb Marsha Marsha Prager has a beautiful drush about Ezekiel. Same idea to me, right? Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the sky, right? What is Ezekiel seeing? He's saying we're taking this on the road, right? The second temple is going to be destroyed, and we're not going to have a homeland. But don't worry, don't fret. There'll be people who know what to do, right? You're going to build like a nice. You build a nice van. You put a kitchen in it. You take everything that you need. But you got to prepare for it. Why? I always like to throw that in because it's my favorite pasuk in all of Torah. We don't know what we're going to need until we get there. But look up, the wheels in the sky, because the wheels of the bus go round and round. We'll all get on the bus and we'll go together. Because the only way to get it together is? Thank you, Mark Grayboys. So my question, my friends, let's pause for a moment. What holds power for you in any of these stories that we've read so far? What is it about a mitzvah? What's the big deal? How do you relate to a mitzvah? Is it commanded? Reb Zalman touches on that already. We talked about we are no longer relate to the idea of God as king and commandedness, but we do relate to what Reb Zalman started one of the chapters with, that we're all Jews by choice. And we choose to opt in. We choose to go with the program and for the program to run in us, like in the background, right? It's like an app. It's the Yid app. All right. So I asked the question. Now I'm going to be quiet. So maybe give somebody a chance to answer it. What holds power for you? And another question, where do you find meaning in any of the mitzvot? Whether that's a positive mitzvah or negative mitzvah. I'm going to ask a million questions until somebody raises their hand to answer one of them. And why even negative?
Neil raised his hand.
Who did? Dan Glazer. Thank you, Dan. You saved me.
No, Neil raised his hand.
Neil raised his hand. Thank you, Dan. Oh,
I
Neil's
muted
being hidden
myself.
by my camera. That's why. Okay. Neil, I'm going to move on.
I like the story. I think we told it last week about the rabbi that advised the woman to start by just light a candle.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one.
Why? What was powerful for you in
The
that?
simplicity of it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right. So that is a very simple story, isn't it, Neil?
It
Where
is.
and Reb Zalman's not the only one. Actually, I think he told somebody else. I forget which Rebbe he's telling that story about. But yeah, do something.
Do something.
Yeah. What? It's the opposite of don't just do something, sit there, which Sylvia Borstein encouraged us to do. It's go do something, right? Just do it. And then we'll understand. Like the story about Shabbos, right? Forget about God, forget about Shabbos. Forget about God. It'll lead us back, if not to hopefully to a different incarnation or different understanding of your theology of divinity. Anyone? Answer to any of these questions? Dan, go ahead, take a stab.
So I almost think about it in a covenantal way, that there's an agreement that I need to stay aware of, and in the front of my mind that I have signed on to the job of doing good things, call it tikkun olam or whatever. Not that there's a quid pro quo, but just in the belief that these things get paid forward and will help with increased connection and relationships and good feelings and everything else like that. And so I don't like the word commandment, but it does give a little bit more oomph and urge to keep it in the front of my mind rather than in the back, periodically thinking about it. so it's not specifically a specific story, but it's just the idea of that a good deed is can be just as important with all the feathers from the pillow and how it lands and how it grows for the ripple effect as the scary part of the bad feathers with Lashon Hara or whatever it is.
Right. Thank you, Dan. And let's remember that one of the mitzvot is tzedek tirdof, that we're not supposed to wait around to be asked to do something. We see a wrong, we take care of it. And coming back to Haf, you talking about the news in the last few days. Think of the young woman, the 17-year-old who took the video. So she certainly has not studied with the rabbis, right? But we might argue that there's something eternal that if we are so blessed, it's ingrained in us to behave in a certain manner when certain things arise, right? And if we sense that there is a aquifer of wisdom that we call God only because we need to name it something, then it's accessible to all of us at any given time. Where the mitzvot are extremely important for us is that they become ritualized and habitualized, right? Because we're human and we forget. It's easy to forget, to give to the poor, to watch our tongues, right? To love our neighbor as ourselves. And what even the heck does that mean? And so there's an added responsibility to study all the nuances of those who came before us to come to arrive at some kind of understanding. What does that even mean? And then, of course, to put it into practice. And I point us to our friend Richard Rohr, Friar Richard Rohr, which some of you at SDI this week, Spiritual Directors International, is one of the headline speakers. He leads an organization called the Center for Contemplation and Action, right? Because you can't have one without the other. Thank God. Mark Rabois, that you sing along with me. I appreciate that. Haf, please.
I wanted, you mentioned ritualized and habitualized.
Yeah.
I wanted to add onto that memorialized, because to me, what you're leaving, your legacy and what you leave behind is basically your collection of mitzvot and your good deeds.
Beautiful, Haf. I love that. And let's keep in mind, memorialize is not just about remembering those who have passed on, but the word I'm thinking of, the time immemorial, right? That things last because we pass them on l'dorotam. That because there are others who remembered, who put things together and kept them together before us, we do the same now in order to carry it forward. And what you say is absolutely true, is that that's part of the importance of memory for anyone, for any culture. Steve.
I was thinking along the lines also of the paying it forward. Another angle to look at it from is like the one that what comes around goes around. That when you do good things and people aren't expecting it, it's kind of like paying forward. But when you need good things to happen to you, unexpectedly, they show up for you too. Or similarly is the negative mitzvot. When you do bad things, so not right away, but at some time, something's going to come back to you. So I kind of look at that circle of
Karma.
that you just.
Of karma, right. Whoever said that.
karma. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. And I don't know about any of you, but I had a time in my life where I skipped over the second paragraph of the Shema. Scott, you're nodding your head. Everybody familiar with the second paragraph of Shema? If you're not, I will be happy. I have a siddur right here to read it. Anybody need me to read it? Don't be shy. It's okay. Roxanne, thank you so much. Roxanne, you probably spoke for a number of other people here. Okay, and it will come to pass, v'haya, that if you, this is from Art Scroll, so please, if I had Reb Zalman's at my fingertips, I would choose to read his. That if you continually hearken to my commandments, that I command you today, hayom, to love Yah, it doesn't say that in Art Scroll, by the way, your God, and to serve Yah with all your heart and all your soul, then I will provide rain for your land in proper time, the early and late rains. You may gather in your grain, your wine, your oil. I will provide grass in your field for your cattle, and will eat and be satisfied. Beware lest your heart be seduced and turn astray and serve gods of others and bow to them. Right? Asher atem zonim achareim, after which you lust. Zonim is lust. It's like you prostitute yourself for them. Then the wrath of Hashem will blaze against you. Whoosh, you could just hear the sound effects in the background. God will restrain the heavens so there will be no rain, and ground will not yield its produce, and you will be swiftly banished from the goodly land which Hashem gives you. Oh my gosh, it sends goosebumps through me. This is fear. This is yira, right? This is fear of God. And this is what, everybody complains that Judaism is a religion of laws and of that vengeful Old Testament God. But if you look at it like yin and yang, Stephen, right? If we screw up the environment, bad things are going to happen. It's just the truth. And we're living to see that today, right? And all of these other things, if your eyes go astray for money or power or influence, the world is really not going to be in balance. Yes, Andra, please. Reb Andra.
Okay, there we go. So maybe all of the consequences, the negative consequences, won't be externally imposed, but maybe they're really, if we look at things as being allegorical that we read, that maybe some of these consequences will be the natural outcomes of not following. For example, so the Torah was written and the Talmud given to us before the age of GPS. So if we look at Torah, which means instruction, as a map, we unfold a big old map that we used to use. And we take this map and we want to get from here to there. And maybe from here to there means we want to become the best person we can be. Except we don't go automatically from here to there. So if we look at the mitzvot as stepping stones, so that it becomes a little bit more bite-sized pieces to go through the whole map. From what you read from the Shema, if we don't follow the path on this map, we're going to get lost. If we don't take a break on Shabbat, for example, or on this map, if we don't take a break and stop at the gas station to refuel, to eat something, to make a potty stop, if we don't take that break, we're going to get tired behind the wheel. So there are natural outcomes of not following, not necessarily the rules, but the map. And we were handed the map. It's just a matter of to what extent do we want to follow each piece of the map, and which stepping stones on the map do we want to stay at a little bit longer than the others. So that's just what I take from what you shared with us.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I want to pick up on that to say the same is true, meaning of a natural progression, natural flow of things. I think from the first paragraph of Shema, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. Now, one might argue or question: is it possible to command that you shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might? Right? But that's not the way that I read it. I read it in much the same way you're reading that, Andra, which is if we are witnesses to the reality and the truth of Adonai Echad, that Yud He Vav He, that existence itself is a unified field, and we surrender to that, we will be in such a state that, and you will love Adonai your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. It's just the natural progression of living in non-duality, of seeing, of arising. What arises from that is seeing each other here. V'ahavta kamocha, seeing and loving your neighbor as yourself. Because you'd want to be treated in the same way, because we're all part of a living, breathing organism. And Reb Zalman always teaches in that language that's an organism. I can't even say the word. It's an organism. You know the word I'm trying to say. If anybody is saying it, you can save me here. Great. All righty. Circumcision, page 138. So Joel actually pushed me on this last week, right? He kind of put me on the spot about the choice, because we're all Jews by choice, of whether or not to circumcise my oldest son, right? He was our first child. We'd had a home birth. I think, did I tell you about the home birth and all of that part? Yeah. So, and why would we invite someone to come in and cut off his shmekel like in 8 days after? It's barbaric. Although I won't go into the whole story of how my wife at that time and I decided. But Reb Zalman makes the comment on 138. Circumcision, it's the first paragraph, is perhaps the best known example of a chok. So someone remind us, what is the difference between a chok and a mishpat? Chukim u'mishpatim atanu limadata al kein Adonai Eloheinu. Right? It's in the song. It's in the Torah. What's a chok? Go ahead, Chaya. What's a chok? What's the difference between a chok and a mishpat?
Mishpat is a law or statute, and a hook has no understanding, like the red heifer is a hook. It doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense to you.
Of course.
And of course, the red heifer, we have some wonderful drashot about like what that's all about, trying to make sense out of it. But you're absolutely right, Chaya. So another example of a chok is shatnez, to mix linen and wool, not to mix linen and wool. Why? Renee likes to say, these are the I said so, mitzvot, right? Those are the chukim. These are the ones that we can't grok with our logical thinking, that we could never have come up with just by living our lives, right? It makes sense. Don't steal. I don't want you to steal from me, or don't kill, or to treat av v'aim or aim v'av. All of these things make an internal, sense to them. But a chok, no. So circumcision, that's what sent me and my wife, like, running and screaming to the rabbi who had married us, to sit with us and to have the conversation. Yet the Torah commands us to perform the bris as a sign, an oath, for all time of our covenant with God. And this brings us back half to you about memorializing, right? Because some things last time immemorial, but only if we pass them on l'dorotam, right? Talk about a leap of faith. For those of us who have sons who went through that, we kind of know the feeling. Perhaps some of us in this room had no problem with it, but I did. And if you want, I would talk about that. We can do that. All right, next page, on page 139, Reb Zalman writes in the first paragraph, the first whole paragraph, other chukim summon a similar sense of mystery and power. Yeah, in a couple lines before that, he says the relinquishing of power that takes place with the fulfillment of a chuk can open us up and touch us to a depth that we can't attain unless we somehow allow the state of vulnerability. Such a realization can earn even the chukim, the consent of the minds as well of our souls. I have a hard time with that. Anybody else? Maybe you can come, maybe he means you can come to that understanding that you get it in your kishkish, but the mind is going to have to be dragged screaming, along in order to accept this and embrace this idea. Here talking about specifically circumcision. Comments, questions before we move on to our next story. Cheshbon HaNefesh on page 141. It's a beautiful story. The Hasidim tell of Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. It's in the middle of the second paragraph. Judaism is not a religion of saints. It understands the difficulty of changing one's behavior, of raising the bar for oneself. Hasidim tell of Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, who used to say before he went to sleep at night, Rabbeinu Shalom, Rabbeinu Shalom, Rabbeinu Shalom. That's a song he wrote. Rabbeinu Shalom. He talks to God as do. It's a doodle. That's the song. So he says, Rabbeinu Shalom, Master of the Universe, today I didn't do so well. I promise that tomorrow I'm going to do it better. Immediately he would chide himself by Levi Yitzchak. That's what you said last night. Aha! But tonight I really mean it. Is that the sweetest story? I mean, we all have said that in so many different ways, over and over and over again, whether it be with our kids or our mates or our friends or our dreams or our netzachness. We're going to count the Omer before we're done. And this new day we're entering into is Netzach Sheba Netzach. It's like all about sustain, like the go for it and the stick-to-itiveness and the seeing the big picture and seeing ourselves at the you are here dot in the big mall that is eternity, and like it's opening up our field of vision to see what we still need to live our lives and really mean it. I can't tell you how many times I've written, I'm going to practice guitar every day. And I mean it. Do I? No. Do I beat myself about it? Yes. Should I be beating myself over it? That's not very healthy. Other things. I know if I eat, anytime after 9:30 or 10 o'clock, it's I'm going to be hitting the Tums at 11 before I go to bed, right? So I can't do that. Do I make the mistake? How many times does it take to walk down the same road? Like that story that I told at Yamim Noraim, during high holidays, about the five autobiography in 5 chapters. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but stopping habitual behavior is really, really hard, right? But that's what Reb Yitzchak, I think he's talking about that. He said, I do really mean it. And I'm not even going to say bli neder. I'm not even going to say that I'm not making an oath, right? Because if I make an oath, right, to play guitar every day, then that's an avera. I shouldn't have made an oath because you're not supposed to make an oath in vain that you're not going to follow through on. So anyway, I'm sure this resonates with every single face, every single one of you in this room. Rachel, Ma, got to unmute yourself. I got you. Here we go. Speak.
If you may, it was a very funny story, not to eat or the guitar or not the guitar. But that's why we believe that whatever we do, tomorrow we'll do better, and God will understand us, you know? I mean, God will understand, well, you couldn't do it today because of whatever reason, and we'll do it tomorrow, we'll try to do it tomorrow. That's what it is. We should say we try to,
Ah,
not promise to do it tomorrow.
right.
Because you never know what tomorrow brings.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's probably implied in the story. Tonight, I really mean it, meaning like,
Tomorrow, try to do better.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Looking around for hands. Yes, Dan, please.
I mean, I have a hard time with this in the sense that, of course, I believe I should beat myself up for failing every day to do the same thing that I strive to do every day. But you know, with the story and everything, but I mean, what is the answer? The answer is just to say, well, I tried, or tomorrow I really mean it. It doesn't sound like there's, or God will forgive me. I'm not sure whether this story gives an answer or just points out the problem or what.
I have an answer. Does anybody else have an answer to Dan's question? It's an important one. Okay, okay, your wife is going to answer the question for
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
I just think it's important to have the intention. That if the intention's made from a willing heart, then I think we do the best that, you know, you do the best that you can, and then you bring that intention back and you try again the next day.
Intention.
And it looks like either Phyllis and Michael's hands are up, one of you.
Yeah, go ahead. And I have a kind of a comment to your comment, Mary Rita's. But go ahead, Michael, because maybe you'll say the same thing I was going to say.
Yeah, well, I think it is important to have the intention to be better, because you could not be so good and then just let it go. So the intention to do good, the intention to do tikkun olam is one of the positive rituals and heritages that we carry as Jews.
Great. Yes. Intention. Hoff. And then Deborah.
I am not a psychotherapist, but I will say this, that what we're talking about here is one of my biggest pet peeves, which is looking backward at regrets of what we haven't done, which paralyzes us frequently from moving forward because we're living in the negative past or the regrets of that, whereas those could actually be turned around to be building blocks for positive looking at the future. And I think a lot of us are paralyzed by those past negative thoughts of what I didn't do. And I think it's an unfortunate psychological phenomenon.
Completely agree.
How much do I owe you?
What's that?
How much do I owe you, Hoff?
I didn't mention any names to anybody.
Deborah, did you have something?
Well, following on what Hoff said, I get tired of arguing with myself. Why didn't I do it? Why am I resisting? The same thing can be on my list for 3 weeks and I don't get to it. And I get so frustrated. And what I'm trying to do is find a way to be more compassionate with myself. Because as long as I stay like this, I'm not going to give up the resistance, whatever it is. As long I have to learn to, I'm trying to learn to be more gentle. And then suddenly it disappears. It's no longer, it's like having a stubborn child living in me. I just realized that as I explained it.
Well, we're very happy for you, Deborah, and we're all expecting yeah, $150 in the mail for the session this evening. But what you're saying is very, very, very important, because we're all, I'm going to use the word guilty, but we are all guilty of practicing, having spiritual practices of beating up on ourselves. There's probably no one better than our own selves to have the regret that you were talking about, Haf, right? The Rebbe Levi Yitzchak is, I think what's going on here is he's letting go of that. He's letting go. He's doing his evening mikveh. This, right? He says this right before at bedtime, I think. Does he say that? Yes, before he went to bed at sleep at night. This is his Shema B'mitah. This is his way of instead of, maybe he probably said all those prayers as well, but this is a way of leaving. This is a mindfulness practice, right? Of living in the present and meaning what he's saying because it's true. I'm not going to be living in yesterday. And what a beautiful, beautiful instruction. And I'm going to use that word as opposed to commandment. Yeah, Meira.
What came to me, though, is that this beating yourself up over things that you haven't done that you say you want to do and you will do, I think that comes from the al-chet that sticks with us after the high holidays. We got so used to beating ourselves for the al-chets that we haven't done that it's hard to let go of.
Yes, it is. And that's why we do it every day. It's in the Shemona Esrei, right? We beat our hearts. So unless you have a regular practice of davening this, I don't anymore do this. Have a regular practice of davening in the morning in this way, but I did for a long time. And so here's what it says. It says, sorry. Okay. Slach lanu avinu ki chotanu, mechal lanu malkeinu ki fashanu. There's the words, right? There's the language from High Holidays, Meira, that you're talking about. Ki mochel v'soleach ata. Forgive us, right? Avinu. For we have erred, pardon us, malkeinu, because we have willfully sinned. And why are we asking for pardon from you? Because you graciously offer pardon, right? So basically the prayer is saying, listen, you've got, it's not a free pass. You've got a reminder every day. And that's what the mitzvot, I was going to say before that Reb Zalman sharing this story literally 2 or 3 pages before the end of the chapter. Remember, this is a chapter about mitzvot. This is a chapter about connections, right? And reminders and intentions, right? There's a reason why he tells the story here. Judy, Scott, and then back to you, Meira.
So I think that our the structure of nighttime prayer and morning prayer is very helpful. What I'm thinking about as you're talking, Mark, is, we sort of turn over our souls to God before we go to sleep. And I always think of it as I'm sending it out to the dry cleaner, And then in the morning with, Elohai Nishama, that soul is returned to me. It's fresh, clean. I have a new start. And we start with blessings for the day. And so every day is a new day. And I think there's so many structures within Judaism for second chance, right? Pesach Sheni, and there's a practice that I love where you take the things that you have that you're determined at the end of high holidays, we have all these resolutions, that we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to be different in this way and that way. And I write them down and put them in a drawer, and every new moon I take them out and look at them to just do another heshbon hanefesh. So what I'm saying is, I think that we have within our tradition lots of structures that help us to live up to be our best selves, and that help us to keep from beating ourselves up if we're not doing it exactly right this minute, that there's always another chance.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate that about our tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about the dry cleaners. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, what you're referring to, at night, Adon Olam, if we get there, that's the last thing we say, Bi'ado afkid ruchi, right? In your hands, right? I place my soul. And in the morning, what's the first thing we say when arising? Shehechazarta b'nishmati b'chemla, that you return your soul to me, with a lot of, a little bit of pity, but a lot of grace. Okay, Scott, please.
Well, that was really beautiful. So I'm maybe don't want to mess it up, but I'm still going back to Mark, your point about, yes, we say Elohai Neshama, but then a few minutes later, you're going to say, I messed up, God, please forgive me. And you can get back in that cycle again. And when Deborah was talking about, when you don't get to that thing that you put on your list forever and forever, I've kind of come to realize sometimes when I do that, it's because I don't really want to do that. Now, is that something I absolutely have to do? If it were, I probably would do it. If I were at work and my boss said you have to do it, I would do it. So that's probably something that maybe I don't really want or have to do, which then gets me back to the whole idea as well, as a mitzvah really a commandment, or is it some of the other words you just used, like intention and connection, and I forget all of those. Because if that thing on your list is something you don't really have to do, then maybe you need to ask yourself, or this is what I do, I ask myself, okay, why am I not doing this? Why do I not want to do this? What are the consequences of letting it go? And sometimes you can figure out that maybe you don't want to do it, maybe you don't have to do it, maybe there's another way that you should be doing it. But that's where you have choice, and which gets back to, it's all choice, as you said, perhaps. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you. Phyllis in Michael's room, did you have your hand up? Did the other one of you, and then Meira, and then we're going to come in for a landing.
Yeah, I think someone was before me, but yes, I do have my hand up, but I'll wait. I think you had designated hitter before me.
Okay, Meira, go ahead.
Thank you. So back to what I was saying about the Al-Ched and then about the morning prayers, where you also are supposed to hit yourself lightly. And I think that it was from Rabbi Nadia Gross that I learned that Reb Zalman said, yes, that you rub, you don't hit, you just rub over your heart, like you were just doing.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up. Okay, Phyllis and Michael, give us, or Michael, give us the last word here.
Oh my God, that puts a heavy, okay.
That's why I'm going to say something to, so don't worry.
I'll do a little chatima here, okay? So I'm struggling a little bit. I love the story, love all the stories, but a little bit with the idea of every day, the same thing. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to try harder tomorrow, but with no sense of progress being made. And I remember something my dad, may he rest in peace, taught me. He said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So it's good to have, you want to have good intentions, but sometimes they take you astray. So I think the Chatima here for me is referencing back my sweet Machatanista, Reb Andra, whom we invited tonight, our Machatanista. Her daughter married our son. And what she's talking about, these little stepping stones. And I think we have to think about even a little stepping stone, a little bitty step is a good thing, just to make a little progress. Dibarti.
Amen, amen. That's a good thing to remember, right? Even at our ages, when there's so much we want to accomplish and get done, right? It's good to slow down. Slower is better. Slower is better, right? So Andrew and Dan, I see you have your hands up. I do like to honor people's time and end at 8:45. So if each of you could make it very succinct, your comment, we'd all appreciate it. So go ahead, Dan, then Andrew, Reb Andrew, and then I will. Then we're going to count.
Yeah, just to keep it brief, I like the idea about the intentions. And I like the idea going when you go to bed to give yourself a little sense of forgiveness, but also not just to think about the things you didn't do, but to actually think, reverse it and think about the things you did do, to keep it positive. And that's the only way to get the little stepping stones, the little baby steps, to think about what you did do. So that's part one. Part two is just in the morning, in addition to gratitude and modani, but also to state some intentions for the day in the morning. So to have some sort of brachot, some sort of kavanot in the morning would be helpful.
Thank you, Dan. That's terrific. And actually, if anybody noticed, for the past number of weeks, that I have been saying that at the beginning of Shabbos morning service together. What are you bringing, and what do you hope to take? So, to me, that fills the experience in a different way. If you come to it, with your offerings in hand. And with what do you want from the Shabbos day, from this gathering, from this holy community? Okay, there was somebody else who.
Andra.
Who was it?
Andra.
Andra. Okay, Andra, please give us the Chatima.
So, to Hoff's point, in my last life before I went back to school, I was a therapist, or I still am a licensed therapist. And what I used to keep in my drawer all the time, remember those finger traps? Those woven wooden finger traps? I always kept one in my drawer when I saw patients. And to Deborah's point about being kind and more gentle with ourselves, I think that's a wonderful symbol of how we struggle against ourselves and we fight ourselves and we have to go further and we have to go further and we have to do all this stuff. And if we take a breath and we move toward the center, our own center, it frees us up. The trap opens up, and then we can move forward. So we think we're moving forward by struggling, but we actually can move forward and be a little more free when we relax a little bit. So if we have that visual image throughout maybe the rest of today and the rest of the week of that finger trap, and realize that our lives are the finger trap and we're the only ones who put ourselves in, we're the only ones who could take ourselves out.
Thank you. That's a terrific image, except for the fact that my brother used to torment me with those coming back from Coney Island. So I'll have to think of something else.
Okay. We'll let you do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All righty. So the importance of numbers as we prepare to count the Omer, and forgive me for not standing, but then I'll be cutting off my head because I don't have another camera set up yet. But if you notice how many people are in the room, there are 18 of us. That's a nice number. The number chai, right? Because also in this week's Parsha, the mitzvot, we're supposed to live by them, not die by them, right? We're supposed to chai bahem. So, a melody for the opening of the bracha, the opening bracha. Yesterday, by the way, was day 24. הנני מוכם מבזומן לקיים את מצוות עשה של ספירת העומר כמו שכתוב בתורה וספרתם ממחרת השבת מיום אביכם את עומר התנופה 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינה ממחרת השבת השביעית תספרו 50 יום ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על ספירת העומר. Blessed are you, Yah, source of endurance, who makes us holy through your mitzvot, commanding us, instructing us, giving us the intention to number our days by counting the Omer. Hayom, Chamisha ve'esrim yom, shehem shlosha shavuot ve'arba yamim la'omer. Today is the 25th day of the counting the Omer, which makes 3 weeks and 4 days of the Omer. And I might have shared with you that one of my go-to books is a book called Counting the Omer, a Kabbalistic meditation guide by Rabbi Min Kantrowitz, also a musmechet of Reb Zalman's. And she approaches each day through all worlds, all the 4 worlds, as well as within the Sefirot. And so one of the invitations she gives us today is in Atzilut, how to make use of Netzach Shebenetzach, which is what today is. And again, Netzach is endurance, that's stick-to-itiveness. It's the things take time. And maybe it's also those stepping stones. Maybe it's seeing all the possible paths and being happy, being happy with one step at a time, and that each step has its own meaning. And I will be bringing Thich Nhat Hanh into the conversation this Shabbos as well, speaking of one step at a time. So here's what she says: the spirit of endurance with endurance, of Atzilut, of Netzach Shebenetzach. She refers to Psalm 102. Of old you established the earth, the heavens are the work of your hands. They shall perish, but you shall endure. This assures us that the eternal spirit continues long after the physical creations of earth and heaven, animals and humans. We are just a small part of an unending spiritual process. And the invitation is to meditate on your small part in a continuing universe. Meditate on your small part in a continuing universe.
Mark, may I add one thing?
Please.
I'm really struck by Netzach Shebenetzach coming exactly halfway through the counting of the Omer. I think when we're on a journey, very exciting at the beginning, and it's also very exciting at the end because you're almost there. But it's when you're in the middle that you need to dig deep to keep going. And I just find it fascinating that we hit Netzach Shebenetzach right here. That's all.
Perfect. How about we end with Olam Chesed? Oh, I think we ended with that this afternoon as well. Olam Chesed Yibanei Yidirai Rai 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 Rai. Olam Chesed Yibanei Yidirai Rai 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 Rai. Olam Chesed Yibanei Yidirai Rai Rai Rai. Olam Chesed Yibanei. I will build this world from love, and you must build this world from love, and if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love. Olam Chesed Yibanei Olam Chesed Yibanei Thank you, my holy friends. Never too early to say Shabbat Shalom. See many of you Shabbos morning Have the blessed end to your week. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ta-da, ta-da.
Bevakasha.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
So we can set this up as a therapy session then, for those of us who are in great need. Good night.
Good night.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Bye.